Alright, so it is about time to cut my patch panel down to fit the Blazer wheel well arch, and then once that's trimmed down to where I think it needs to be, I'll kind of place it on there, make sure it's in the right spot, and then I'll scribe that edge in the fender to cut that out to match. And the first step up is to marking this panel. I have scribed a couple lines with a razor blade where about where I want it, but I don't want to just cut it in a round spot, so I'm gonna kind of try and mark it at least in a smooth curve. There we go. And I suppose I could eyeball the rest of the way, just using my finger as a guide. Oops. So that's kind of about where it needs to be trimmed to. You notice the holes that I drilled to keep the panel from shifting, those are way off in a part that I won't be needing. So those are okay. Let's trim that out. So what I'm gonna use to trim is a small grinder with a cutoff wheel. And so I'm just gonna kind of go slow and get through this curve as smoothly as possible. I may even kind of clean it up on the sander just so it's a nice smooth curve. I don't know why that matters if I'm going to weld it up, but it just seems like it's probably a good idea. So we'll get going here. Definitely like the sparks going downward instead of into my face, but sometimes you gotta sacrifice. Alright, I've got my piece kind of sanded down on the belt sander a little bit just to clean up that edge, and I'll deburr it here so I don't slice my fingers. That's kind of the important part. I don't want to chamfer the edge of this sheet metal too much so I have a consistent material thickness when I go back to weld it. I think it needs a little bit of a deburr here. Alright. I've also kind of cleaned up this edge that was heat shrunk and hammered, so it's a little smoother and doesn't quite have as much riffles in it. It's really flat. Okay. Let's get so all I did was to figure out where I needed to trim is I got this up to where I needed. Actually, it sticks on there with magnets right now, you can see. It looks pretty good. I got kind of a reinforcement bar back here as kind of a rock slider, they call it, I think. And I use that as a spot to measure where my tire needs to, where it can't go any deeper than that. And so that's where this angle is sitting. And so I think that's pretty, it actually fits really well with those little magnets kind of along the edge. I don't know if that's just something I just discovered. It kind of holds the panel right there and you don't need to have to clamp it or do any weird stuff. So it actually fits really good. So let me take this off and take my paper template off. And I suppose I could probably just put a couple magnets under here, huh? Use that as a kind of a trial run. Looks like I did pretty good on my trim. I got enough material, so it is kind of close, but I can kind of stand back and take a look at it. It's actually really good. I don't know if that's visible. We can zoom in a little bit. I don't want to shake the camera too much, but so that wheel well has been opened up wider for larger tires, and so that's why that filler piece was mangled up in the first place, is because I didn't do the repair. I didn't open up the wheel well very cleanly when I did it a while back. So that is looking pretty good. It's still a a sheet metal offset, or a sheet metal thickness offset from where it needs to be, and so I'll go ahead and scribe the fender, and then we'll cut that to match. Alright, I got my piece cleaned up and trimmed down. I've got, all I did was, I did mark this. I think I'm gonna go a little slow and make sure I trim really carefully. So it's really hard to scribe this. All I did was get this panel up here and take a Sharpie and run it along the new line, and I'll cut this current fender down along that line. I'm going to keep it a little short of where I need to be, just in case, because it's shifted down by the thickness of a piece of sheet metal, or the thickness of the sheet metal, and so it's a 1/16 of an inch or so off, and so I'm going to be really careful trimming that, and I'm just going to keep saying that until I'm comfortable with actually trimming it. So I think I'm pretty good here. So I think we just gotta go do it. Okay. No turning back now. I did a lot of grinding and sanding and grinding and sanding. I learned a couple things. One thing is, I've got my paper template up here so that I know when the position of that patch panel is right, and I've got it, I think I nailed it really, really well. You can see that edge follows that paper line all the way down there. I can turn this light on. I don't know if that helps. That probably just makes it worse. So yeah, so that's my patch panel. I've got it clamped in there. And one thing I learned with the clamps, well, let me put the camera back, and two things I learned that was kind of fun. It's kind of handy little tools if you get these little clamps. You clamp them halfway on your joint. It's really hard to get this patch panel up there, and you're taking it off and putting it on to grind a little bit more off and doing all this stuff. You get it clamped halfway there, and you can just kind of press this. You can kind of press it in there, and it'll hold it without having to take the clamp off and do all that kind of stuff. Other thing I learned was a really handy little tool is that having light shining back through this crack or this joint can really help you. If it's not quite fitting right, you can kind of see what points are contacting, and then mark those and take a little bit more off, put it back on, take a little bit more off. The third thing that really got me really well is I had first started just hand placing this up here, and figuring out what was contacting and what was still needing to be trimmed off. And I found that I didn't get the position exactly right, especially down here, because it's got this return curve. And so when you get this twisted wrong, the little edge that returns, it moves out or in or out or in, and I had like an 1/8 of an inch gap for a bit until I realized that. And so big tip, always clamp, if you're gonna mark or decide anything, always clamp the thing into position no matter what. That way you don't get fooled with arbitrary hand positioning. So I've got it pretty, luckily I had marked it a little bit too large, and so I was fitting it up, and this edge was a little bit too inward, and so when I put my paper template on it, I still had, an 1/8 of an inch or so of part to move in. So I was able to fix that and trim it. So it's all trimmed really well, and so I could probably use a couple more of these clamps just to keep it flush in spots. And so I think it's ready to tack weld it up. That is the kind of the fit up there. It's pretty tight. I don't know, I can't really measure it. It's much less than 1/16 of an inch. It's easily less than 32nd of an inch. One thing I got is down here is this curve. The curve does not quite match both, but once I pinch them up and if I clamp them there, I can get them to match up. So I think they're okay. I just don't have any more of those clamps, which I probably should go get a couple more because they're pretty useful. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tack weld up here, and then I'll probably go every 2 or 3 inches and try and, not sure, since this one has some stress in it, well, I suppose I could clamp it, and then once it's tack welded, it'll be okay. But I just didn't want to try and tack weld something that was under a lot of stress and then have it pop on me in the middle of the process. So that's it. I think we're ready to go. So let's get it tacked up.